and communication is at its utmost best, it's become really important for businesses to see emotional intelligence as a strategic skill. And so with us are Adebanke Falade. So everyone will have a couple of minutes to introduce themselves properly. We have Odili, and we have Motola as well with us. So I give each panelist 3 minutes to introduce themselves. I'm Emeze Junima. I'm a member of IABC, West Africa Insurance Group, and I'll be moderating the session. And I'll now invite the panelists to give us 3 minutes introduction for themselves. Thank you. So maybe we'll start with Mr. Odili, being the only male on the panel.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Odili Ujubongo. I'm the Managing Director of Anambra State Signage and Advertisement Agency. I've had a couple of years in the advertising business, about 30 years. You know, that's the only career that I've ever had apart from what I'm doing now, which is equally advertising. But this time around, I'm communicating with a different kind of audience and a different kind of stakeholders. But interestingly, it's a wonderful day, and I'm very happy to be in this place to join in discussing this very germane topic today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Adebanke, you're on the screen, so I guess you're next.
Hello, hi everyone from this side. Good morning from this side. My name is popularly known as Banks. I have been in the communications space. I think that will be since I graduated, really. Started doing a lot of social media, eventually dived into business comms, and I'm a member of IABC Calgary.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Motola, you're next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Motola Oyebanjo. I'm dialing in from the UAE at the moment. I'm largely, like everyone else, I've been in communications for most of my life, most of my career. I started actually in HR and then moved into communications. So I think that's probably the only difference. At the moment, I'm communications director at Aerial View Communications. And I'm also a communications consultant for Africa at the United Nations Global Compact. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the conversation and to learning from everyone as well. So thank you.
Excellent. I think it's really interesting to see that each of the panelists cut across various sectors: public sector, international organization, and private sector. So it's really interesting that we're going to have insight from these various areas of the business world or the commerce world. And while it may seem counterintuitive to consider feelings or emotions in a field typically characterized by structure, logic, analysis, emotional intelligence is perhaps a crucial driver for productivity, for employee satisfaction, and profitability, in essence. And so I would like for us to sort of set the tone. So I'll start by asking Motola, what would you say, or rather, can you share an example in trying to set the context of the principle of emotional intelligence? Can you share an example in the course of your career of how emotional intelligence has positively or negatively impacted a business communication strategy or outcome? Is there any example you can share that highlights that principle of emotional intelligence and how it really plays a crucial role in communication strategy?
Yes, thanks for the question. I mean, emotional intelligence is so critical. And there's one example that immediately comes to mind. And I remember I joined an organization to lead communications. And when I joined the organization, for the first few weeks, it was weird. I met cold shoulders everywhere, from directors to heads of departments, even a lot of the employees. I'm sorry, there's some, I hope there's some background noise here. I hope it's not too much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So, I mean, I met a lot of cold shoulders and I was wondering what in the world was going on. My communication strategy was ready. It had been approved. It was on point, good to go. But other than a few quick wins, I couldn't get anything concrete done. So I met with, I sat to one of the directors who was a part of my interview session. And I said to him, look, this is what's going on. What exactly, why am I facing brick walls? And then he told me that, interestingly, there was quite a lot of negative history, between the leadership in the communications department and many other departments, which was what I was facing. And basically he said to me, look, one of the reasons why he insisted I would be selected for the role was because during the interview session, I displayed a lot of maturity and emotional intelligence, and that he required that I needed to, mend relationships, build bridges, and basically make things work, because there was a lot of work that wasn't getting done. So, I mean, with that insight, I then started the work of, building bridges, mending relationships, having conversations, trying to make sure that things really worked, and based on that process, slow and steady, we started to see a difference. And by the time I left, I mean, you could see a huge difference in the organization. There was improved teamwork, improved collaboration between departments. So it speaks to how important emotional intelligence can be in the work that you're doing. You can have your strategy and you find out that you're not getting a lot done if you don't understand how to manage people, how to manage people's emotions, people's feelings, and things like that. And I just want to emphasize 5 things that I learned from that process. The first is listening. Being able to listen to people is critical. People want to feel heard. And I think making sure that you listen to all the sides and knowing how to manage all of those relationships is critical. The second is mediation. Sometimes you need to mediate between people and build relationships and mend fences. In fact, sometimes they'll say, Motola, you're the only one that can talk to this person, go and talk to them and sort this out, So that's really critical as well. And then getting stakeholder input, making sure that you have that conversation with different people to understand, and making sure that you provide, you input that into whatever it is that you're planning. I think the other thing I would say is add value to their work or to their person, because in communications we have such a great opportunity to do that, because one, we can give people visibility, we can train them around media, we can help them with their thought leadership, their personal brand. So we have so much to offer. So when you add value to people, they're more open. And then finally, I think it's about reputation. When people know they can trust you and you have integrity, then they're happier to open their doors to you. But ultimately, it takes time. So I always encourage patience in the process of, working in business communication. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, what I'm really drawn to, and I'm sure everyone else may agree with me, is this thing of insight, because you talked about building bridges and the importance of insight when it comes to building bridges. You can't really repair a relationship or build trust without having insight as to what may have gone wrong. And that brings me to the second question to Mr. Odili. So Motola has set a scene and has sort of made us see the things that are critical in trying to foster emotional intelligence in the workplace. So in a situation where it's difficult to get the insight, how can we use that skill of emotional intelligence to enhance collaboration and teamwork within, say, a business setting, particularly for communications professionals? So if you're a new person and you don't have background of what has happened in the system, you don't have the insight that may help you to either remedy communication lapses or things like that. How can you, with emotional intelligence, really enhance collaboration and teamwork so that you actually get the insight and stakeholder support that you may require? Please unmute, sir. Sorry, Mr. Odili, you're muted, so you might have to unmute yourself first so we can hear you.
It's actually raining cats and dogs. Yeah, that's why she was hearing the background noise the other time, so I had to mute. Sorry about that. It was as though you came in here when I stepped in as the managing director of the agency, because that was actually the experience that I encountered. Because I came into a space, where coming from the advertising world, that's an entirely different system, different culture, different structure. I came into a typical government setting, civil service setting, and everything, and I realized that if I needed to communicate, if I needed to get things happen, that I had to find a different way to do it. And the first thing I did was to be patient. First of all, I thought of the word empathy, which was the most important thing, and I asked myself, if I were in their positions, what would I do? That I would think that a new person coming, may think that I'm not qualified to do what he wants us to do, because I came with an entirely different idea, changed the title systems, the way I'll be addressed, the way we address everybody else, and then I tried as much as possible to let them forget that I am the managing director, but that I'm their colleague and not Oga. So by the time I broke down that mentality, people started left my doors open. People could walk in, ask me questions, tell me about themselves, about their family challenges and things like that. Within 2 weeks, they realized that there was a new sheriff in town. This sheriff does not have a gun, but he has an open hand that welcomes people. So sometimes the critical thing there is for you to ask yourself this question: if I were in their shoes, what would I do? And the very moment you ask this question and you understand the answer clearly, you realize that self-awareness, that you have your own weaknesses, you have your own strengths, and you have your own triggers. You have things that make you angry, things that make you happy. In the same way it is for everybody else that's in that office. So it's a lot easier for us to look at it as at what we can do, which is to think. The very moment you get that right, the next step will be like Motala mentioned, you listen. If you don't listen, there's no way you will know what the problems, the challenges the organization itself is having, and the challenges that the individuals in that organization, are having. And then, of course, you may equally have the challenge of because communication is not just internal; it's also external. You may have the challenge that when you are communicating to your immediate stakeholders, maybe other colleagues in government, or to your superiors, maybe to the governor or to everybody else, that it's not the same way you were communicating in advertising that you have to follow. But since we are talking about emotional intelligence here, the critical thing, the first thing you have to think about is that this person I'm sending this message to, when the person gets this message, what will the person think of the organization that I represent? If you have that at the back of your mind, it's going to shape the language, with which you communicate. So I think that for us to understand emotional intelligence in the workplace, the key thing is that we must always take a step back. Whatever we do, take a step back, ask ourselves questions, how it concerns us and how it concerns the feelings of others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Odili. I like that you talk about empathy a lot, because I think, well, most times in communication, there's always a tendency to want to get the message across first, without particularly considering the person receiving it and if they're even in the position to receive the message. So empathy sort of creates a balance. From what I hear you're saying, you talk about openness and transparency. You talk about self-awareness, which is really important because I guess that self-awareness allows you to put yourself in the position of the other person. And that brings me to another question, which I'll direct at Banker, because sometimes, emotional intelligence can be a bit vague. There's a struggle of, am I saying this thing just to make the person feel okay? I don't want to be too direct. And in the process of trying to manage emotions and being empathetic, there's a tendency not to convey the message clearly. So, Banker, I want to ask, how does emotional intelligence play a role in fostering ethical communication practices, but not just the messaging, but the practice within an organization? And how does this impact organizational transparency, where you're not so much, you're trying as much as possible to send the right message, give the right perception about your organization, be transparent, but also manage the information. Do you understand the context? Yes, does that context? Banker, I'm speaking with you.
Yes. I believe so.
Yes, so it's a question on,
I think.
Sorry, it's a question regarding ethical communications and just ensuring that we maintain organizational transparency and not get too vague and caught up with in a way that we're not clear with what we say.
So, yeah. How do I think I'm trying to find the perfect example to start with and then just try to bring everything together. So I understand that when we are trying to be emotionally intelligent in our conversations, there are a lot of things that we have to filter out because you don't want to, send the wrong message. But then again, you want to send the right message and ensure that your audience and your stakeholders understand exactly what you are saying. Sometimes that's, should I say, conflict in that, oh, I have to communicate this, but then again, I have to communicate in a way that should I use the word insulting, or should I use the word it communicates everything I want to communicate, but then it doesn't communicate so much that people know exactly what is going on. And so there is that level of, should I say, trust and transparency and openness. I think the only example that comes to mind is so my former organization, in the bid to be transparent, or in one of the organizations I worked in back in Nigeria, in the bid to be transparent, we're going through a crisis, an internal crisis, and it was a financial one. And I remember that we had a meeting with the CEO, and the CEO was telling us that, oh, due to this and that, we might not be able to pay salaries, right? And so there was that conversation of not being able to pay salaries, and it wasn't like, oh, what's the way forward? And so she just said we'll not be able to pay salaries. There was no information after that, and then meeting adjourned. And obviously, when you give that kind of vague information, people start to wonder, and a lot of people start to feel almost desensitized, and try to think of their options. Or should I start looking for a job now? What's the next thing to do? What about? And so, because it was a small organization, so again, even though the message was vague, there was open communication in that aspect, or an opened up policy. So I was able to walk into the CEO at that time's office and to say, listen, I understand that this and this is going on, but at this point, this is what is going on amongst the employees. We are unsure what is going on. We know you say that you will not be paid salaries, but we don't understand how many weeks is that going to take. Is it going to take a couple of months? And what are the things that we should look forward to? What are the things that we shouldn't look forward to? And so we had to have another, almost like a town hall meeting, really, whereby everyone was able to express themselves. Oh, this is what is going on. Talk about the anxieties that they're facing. And I think during that town hall meeting, there was more information. And so she explained at that time that, okay, she understood that. She said that there will not be, she will not be able to pay salaries. But what she actually meant was she was going to pay half within the first 2 weeks and then pay the other half before the month, before the end of the month, or before the month runs. I think that would be the perfect example that comes to mind. And I think that in all these things, when we talk about ethical communication practices, I think it just helps employees to feel at ease, and even stakeholders as well. And you feel at ease because you know that, okay, you feel like you are a part of the company, or you feel like you know what is going on, for instance. You don't feel like you are sidelined. You don't feel like, the company is over there and then you are over here, because you are carried along in every form of communication. We are more likely to trust the organization, more likely to trust the CEO, more likely to trust the HR. And I think, again, when we had that conversation, my colleagues and I also felt heard and we felt valued, because we felt like our opinions were taken into consideration, and we felt like our CEO at that time acted on those opinions and acted on those suggestions, should you say. Or I felt like, because I was the one that had the conversation we had. So I'm not sure if I answered that as you wanted, but yeah.
Yes, I mean, I like that you have highlighted. I like that you've highlighted the role that leadership plays in, communication, because communication is the role of every single person in the organization. But the purveyor and the person who owns communication in the organization is executive.
It's always
always the top. So I like that you've highlighted that. I like the fact that you talked about engagement, because emotional intelligence is important, but it's nothing if it's not used. So the use of emotional intelligence comes in with engagement. And there's truth, which obviously comes with accuracy and transparency, and that everyone feels carried along, which is the idea of knowing, as Mr. Audley said, knowing what will I do if I was in that person's position. I would like to be carried along. And that brings me to my next question to Mr. Audley. A recent research in the American Journal of Pharmaceutical Education talked about the strong relationship between emotional intelligence and obviously the ability of someone to make strong decisions, sustain relationships in the workplace, to deal with stress, to cope with a greater degree of change, which somehow has been highlighted in Banker's answer. So I want to ask you, can you provide us with examples of how, the course of your career, how emotional intelligence, you've used it to leverage or enhance employee engagement and fostered a more positive organizational culture? Because organizational culture is very important in building profitable and sustainable companies or organizations. So how would you give us an example of how we can use that strategic skill of emotional intelligence to really foster a positive organizational culture and enhance employee engagement?
Okay, thank you. Like Banker did, I'll use the last place I worked to answer your question. When we were setting up Brand Aristotle Limited, we had a major challenge. We were coming from different agencies and different backgrounds, and then we highlighted the challenges we were having with the places that we came from. Because of the challenges, we said, okay, we're going to design the system in a manner that will cut off all the challenges that staff were having then. Number one was lack of communication. What we mean by communication, it was from top straight to bottom, nothing. So, and your emotions were never considered. You were asked to work anytime you walk in, and you can be called anytime to come and work. And we said, okay, that we could make workers work anytime, do whatever they want themselves, and not by forcing them to do so. So what did we do? We created what we call the work and play culture. The colors were black and white. We said that black stood for work, while white stood for play. So in the office was designed to have a play area and have a work area. So then we created what we call the graffiti street. The graffiti street was a place where if the MD did something you didn't like or you don't like, you go straight there. That we bought cans and put them in a basket. You pick a can, and spray whatever you like, write whatever nonsense you want to write about the MD there. Anything you write on the graffiti street is not held against you. So with that, people could express their anger. You find out that nobody, we didn't have clashes, we didn't have issues. If it's, there's nothing like, you could come to work by 9 o'clock because the creative agency and decide that you don't want to work, that you want to play. You can ask a colleague, do you want to play Scrabble? He said, yes. He comes there, you'll be playing Scrabble. The MD will see you, say, hello, okay, I'll come in and beat you guys in the next, give me 30 minutes, let me finish what I'm doing. 2 hours later, that's it, by 4 o'clock, you're supposed to go home by 4 o'clock, but bet you 10 o'clock, people are there because they spend time playing. While they were playing, ideas came to their head. So they go back, do their work. You could walk in, sometimes I'll wait into the office on Sunday and I'll meet people working, not because you forced them to do so. What I'm trying to say is that you could use structure, you could use culture, to design an organization in a manner, that will bring out the best, in you. And that's making the emotional connection rather than the physical connection. I don't know if that answers your question.
You've given me so many nuggets. You've given me so many nuggets there. This thing about work and play. I mean, it's a big thing in tech firms where they really, really talk about play being part of work because it feeds innovation.
You borrowed it from advertising.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to start a fight here, but I will, because I'm a comms person, I might just lean towards your.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, the fact that play, not just innovation, but it also allows you to connect. And there's a degree of connectedness that allows people to do well, to feel like they're part of the system and to really want to give their all. But I want to pick on one thing, the thing of Gravity Street, and I'm coming to you, Motola. So this Gravity Street is a great idea, but I wonder if there's some anonymity or people just, someone knows the color that you've sprayed and somehow they know what you've written. And if a crisis occurs from what you have written, so Motola, this question is to you now. Can you provide insight on how, in the event that from Gravity Street a crisis occurs, can you provide insight on how emotional intelligence can be integrated into crisis communication strategies? So if, for instance, someone puts something on Gravity Street that then causes some kind of crisis or destabilizes the system, how are we going to use emotional intelligence to handle this? How does that come into the strategy of crisis communication?
Okay, first, I love the interesting ideas that Ottilie shared about how to create a great culture and including emotional intelligence into that. It's fantastic. I always believe that employee engagement and the work that we do in business communications is so critical. But coming to crisis communication, now anyone that knows me knows that this is kind of like my worst part of communication. And that's simply because the truth is a crisis is a difficult place to be, whether it's an industrial action or a loss of lives, or, it's already a really difficult place to be for the organization, for the people. People are tense, they're worried, afraid. Depending on what the situation is, property might be at risk, people's careers might be at risk, or even people's lives, And so emotional intelligence is so critical in these situations. I'll give a quick example of the COVID-19 situation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I can hear you.
Great. So I'll give the example of the COVID-19 crisis that we all just went through. Now, this is public knowledge, so I'm happy to share. For most of us who know, the ground zero, the first known case was discovered in Lafarge, Africa. And I had just left Lafarge a few months before this happened. So I was so happy that, I wasn't managing that crisis. I was so excited. I was calling my colleagues, how are you guys doing? Hope you're fine. That kind of thing. Feeling cool myself. It happened around the weekend, And then on Saturday, I suddenly got a call from the office telling me that apparently some of my colleagues in the new organization I was working with were on the flights coming into Nigeria with the first case. So immediately, of course, that meant get into action. Weekend is over. You needed to take action and start crisis management and crisis communication immediately. So all the feeling cool myself was over. So crisis communication, it's critical to be sensitive. We had to be sensitive to the feelings of our colleagues who were in that situation, because understandably, their health was at risk. They were worried for their lives. The same thing with other colleagues who had been exposed to them. And then even other stakeholders, people who were working in the same offices with us, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of how to use emotional intelligence in this kind of situations, there are 5 key things I want to emphasize. The first, which Ottilie mentioned earlier, is empathy. So in terms of all of the communications templates, for people who do a lot of crisis communication, you have to have your communication templates and messaging ready, your holding statements, executive messages. Those are things that we had prepared ahead. Immediately we knew that there was even a COVID-19 global crisis going on. So making sure that those messages, there's empathy included, you are sensitive in the messages that you're pushing out to people who are affected or to people who might be affected. Empathy is so key. Again, the second thing is active listening. In that kind of situation, some people did not want to go for the test, some wanted to go for the test, they weren't sure what was going to happen, So active listening to people and understanding what their concerns are, and then knowing how to manage those concerns is critical. The third thing is being willing to dialogue. Where there are opposing concerns. So for instance, in an industrial action, there's the importance to be willing to dialogue in those situations and being able to negotiate. Those are things that as business communicators, we need to get involved in. The fourth thing I'll emphasize is clarity. Because as much as you want to be sensitive and all of that, you need to be really clear about the message you're passing across, so people know what to expect next, and how to manage the crisis. And I think the last thing I will say is being timely, because when you're in a crisis situation, you want to make sure that your stakeholders are carried along quickly. Being timely is actually being emotionally intelligent, because there's so much happening, and you want to make sure that you're on top of it. So for me, those are 5 things that I think are really important in the space of emotional intelligence and crisis communication.
So Motola, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put you on the spot here, because I like that you've worked in private sector. I guess, again, working in private sector, you probably will have dealings with people in public sector, and now you have some work going on in the international organizational space. So I'm going to ask, based on what you just answered, you talked about the willingness to dialogue and negotiate. Mm-hmm. Dialoguing, and these are very tricky things. Dialogue is at one end, negotiation is at the other end. And clearly there's a lot of emotional intelligence there, because the negotiation, sometimes the emotional intelligence, you can forget it. We're Africans, so there's a tendency to just say, I beg, this emotional intelligence has to chill somewhere. I need to negotiate this matter. Then there's a dialogue where, you really have to be an abego, please. So I want to ask, when does one, in the process of a negotiation, what kind of emotional intelligence? Is emotional intelligence just a straight spectrum where it's the same whether in dialogue or negotiation, or is there a variation? I want us to just put it out realistically. If, say, you're trying to negotiate a deal with 2 people at extreme ends, at what point will your emotional intelligence peak to, a harder level, and at what end will it sort of pedal to the softer level? Would you shed some light on that, just for us to have some context?
Okay, it evolves, and it's contextual. So it depends on the situation. It depends on what the conversation is about, what's going on. So for instance, in an industrial action, your emotional intelligence needs to be super high because there's so many different things that could go wrong very quickly, But in a negotiation, for instance, in international development, where, you're sitting with two governments, so different, look at our Ukraine-Russia situation at the moment. In that kind of situation, it's long-term planning, it's long-term discussions, it's people's lives that are being affected globally. And you then need to, ask yourself, what's the end game? What are we trying to achieve here? And how much give and take do we need to do? So in that, at that point, those are the things that go through your mind when you're having those kind of conversations and negotiations. So I'll just say that it's really, it's not one size fits all. That's the honest truth. But that emotional intelligence is needed, absolutely. I was having a conversation recently with my husband. I say, you see this Russia-Ukraine thing, for instance, now, where all this war, nobody wants to back down. At the end of the day, it's still going to end up at the negotiation table. Can we please get to the table and just solve this thing instead of having so many lives lost and, all of that. So I think we need to have more people building those skills on every side so that we can resolve a lot of things faster.
Thank you. So, Ms. Odili, I want to take this back to the public sector where you are now. And it's important because you have come from private sector and gone right into public sector. So I'm going to talk about ethical standards, right? I'm going to talk about ethical standards because I think in this part of the world is something that sometimes is blurred, right? So I want to ask, in what ways can communications professionals in the public sector navigate sensitive topics or address controversial issues while maintaining those ethical standards that are key for us as communications professionals? So if you had to advise a young, someone who's just started their career in the public sector and they're faced with a sensitive situation, but they know what the profession expects of them ethically when it comes to standards, how would you tell them to navigate? I mean, how would they use emotional intelligence in a way where they are not going against ethical standards of the communication professional?
Yeah, thank you very much. The most important thing is that every organization you lead, whether it's private or it's public, there are goals that are set for you to achieve. And those goals will cascade down to everything else that you do. Emotional intelligence helps you to have a balance in achieving the goals while managing, situations that you find yourself in. Like Murtala mentioned, is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Sometimes crisis will just fall in your hands as a result of something that you know that is right, that you did it and is right. I'll give you an example. It's a very funny one. During the electoral campaigns, the candidate of a particular political party, who happened to be somebody I went to the same school with and I shared a lot of respect for. But because of my work, there was something standard that they didn't meet. And as a result, I brought down some of their structures. When I brought down some of their structures, everywhere went haywire. I was trying to keep to standards, and I created wildfire for myself. But what did I do? The first thing was first of all, I had to allow the fire to burn for a while because I was the one that started it. If I didn't start it, I would have done what Murtala mentioned, which is that you do timely intervention. I had to allow it to burn to the point that I could handle it, because whatever I said at the beginning will not be considered at that point in time. So I allowed it for 2 days. Everybody on earth was calling me. Everybody that knew me said that you shouldn't destroy the career you have built because you're in politics and this. I kept quiet. I only told them I am just doing my job. And someone called me and said, how come you are so calm and the whole place is burning down? I told them because I know I did the right thing. So what I'm trying to tell you is the very moment you know that you are doing the right thing and you want to achieve the goal of the organization, you remember that emotional intelligence does not necessarily mean that you have to pander to what will be against the organization. It's not all the time. So what happened was, like, I had a mass, I had a whole public to deal with. All I did was to, I didn't react. I didn't even write anything. What I did was to go ahead and do exactly the same thing to the political parties that were ruling in the state where I was. When I did exactly the same thing to other people, everybody saw, oh, this man wasn't really after this person. He was just doing his job. I don't know. So with that, I was able to douse it. After that, that was when I did my press release. When my press release came, 2-3 days, the fire went down and everybody forgot it. So what I'm saying in essence is that you really have to think. Think. It's not all the time that we have to be sissy. Sometimes you have to be hard. It's part of emotional intelligence. It's not really, it's being hard is an emotion. Being soft is an emotion. It's not all about soft side of management. Sometimes it's an emotion. So that's actually my answer to your question.
You do, because it also highlights this thing on dialogue, negotiation. Dialogue being a softer way of showing us emotional intelligence, and negotiation being the harder way. So from all of this, I would deduce that emotional intelligence isn't just a straight line. It's a spectrum, it's contextual. Sometimes hardness as well is a way of, showing that emotional intelligence. So Banky, I'm going to come to you now. I'm going to ask specifically a question around measuring up and upskilling, because measurement is also a process, and it's a way of, as describing how, or ascribing how this skill of emotional intelligence plays out, and how well it has played out, how it has influenced outcomes in an organization, in relationships. So I want to ask, what specific skill or qualities do business communicators need to develop that emotional intelligence muscle in their work, so that they're effectively able to engage with stakeholders, with employees, obviously with different groups of people? I guess the way to become more versatile to using that muscle. What sort of, are there micro skills or qualities that they need to build so that that emotional intelligence skill is actually at its utmost?
Okay, so I think my video has been freezing for a while. I just want to be sure that you can see me clearly. Yeah. So I think I think we have mentioned some of the skills, so I might just like highlight and just continue from there. I think empathy is a very important skill to have. I think the ability to actively listen is an important skill to have. And it's very easy to say actively listen, but you have to actively listen. Back when I was in Nigeria, I used to do a thing on LinkedIn, and I called it social media listening and monitoring. And what I did was I tried to filter out the conversations the external audience was having about a specific brand, especially in response to a particular campaign that they had, or a brand launch or a brand relaunch, so to say. So here, there's a particular like software, I call it a software, or yeah, a software that we use to send money back home. And it was called Lemonade, right? And about 2-3 weeks ago, there was an update, and everybody updated their app, and they just realized that there was a total relaunch of the brand, and we were not informed beforehand. And so it was almost a state of, I don't understand what's going on. And this is an app that we use to make financial transactions. One would think that beforehand, or before the brand relaunch, there would have been like several communication to the stakeholders. Oh, this is what is going on. We're going through a relaunch. We want to ensure that you have similar transaction, blah 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 blah. And then was a back and forth or confusion amongst people that use the app on the reason why. And there was it was too difficult to pronounce. And I'm like, I've not seen anyone that has any difficulty in pronouncing lemonade. You change it to white. I mean, I didn't see the correlation, the color, even the new colors. I found them appalling. I actually sent an email, to the brand telling them that I wanted to, deactivate my account. And the only reason I still have the account is because none of my bank accounts in Nigeria still work. So I'm kind of stuck, right? But I think in that in that regard, there should have been almost like a follow-up communication to people that use the Apple. Apologize if you felt if you were not informed beforehand. Well, this is why we did what we did. We felt that this and this and this and this. You continue to do business with us. We assure you that this is for the best for even the stakeholders and the company as well. I expected that sort of communication because I what people had to say. And people had a lot of opinions. There was none of that. So actively listening is an important thing. And I think non-verbal communication is also essential. I'll give a perfect example. Communication an organization in Nigeria, in a country like Canada, is a complete thing, especially internal communication. For instance, I had to pick a picture for a banner for a campaign that we had, and I, just went on the stock image site and I picked a picture. I said it's possible to pick a picture portraying different cultures. And when I sent it to the lady in charge of diversity and inclusion, she did not like the picture, and that was because the only black person that was in the picture was at the back, and the picture was blurred. And she was like, "Oh, that this wouldn't fly." And it took a while for me to figure it out, but it just occurred to me that having the black person at the back in a block background just connotes that the black person is not important or is not as important as other races that are informed. So yeah, non-verbal, I think that would come under non-verbal communication, and also being um details, attention to details, people inside and people outside, ensuring that the people your stakeholders, know your stakeholders properly, and then cater your communication to those people. And I think cultural sensitivity is also important over here, because of how diverse Canada is. There are different celebrations, different days, and as a company that has customers that come from different cultures and different backgrounds, you have to take into consideration all these things. And so we have, I think we have a day for Filipinos, we have a day for Ukrainians, we have all these days. And as a business, you have to take all these things into consideration when relating with your internal and external stakeholders, because these things make them feel understood, they make them feel respected, and they almost give like a sense of belonging in the organization in the long run. Again, we've spoken about transparency, but again, transparency is extremely important. Yeah, I think these are some. There are a lot more. We can be on this for a long time, but I think these are some very important skills that the business communicators should have.
So I'm going to draw two things that probably wasn't mentioned by that you've mentioned, that wasn't mentioned by either Mutola or Mr. Odili here. One is responsiveness, and what comes to mind for me is someone tells you, "I'll get back to you," and they don't. And I think that's also emotional intelligence, where you get back to the person, not back to that person doesn't make that person feel heard. So there's a degree of responsiveness that comes to that. So thank you for highlighting that. I also like that you talked about attention to detail, and you gave the example of the picture and how it connects to inclusion as well. Recently, a bank that will not be named on this platform had recently updated its app. I think the whole of Nigeria is dealing with this problem.
The whole of Nigeria was really
Yes. So again, that's something else when it comes to responsiveness. Attention to detail, I would say perfect example could be somebody advertising, safety, and they don't have a helmet on, or they don't have gloves, or, posted as advertising something like maybe natural hair products, and the person that is advertising the products has relaxed hair. Little things like that show that, poor attention to detail and not being really emotionally intelligent when it comes to, messaging or communication. So thank you for that. I would now ask.
I just remember.
Go ahead.
I just remember that Libya that where it was an ad for the cream. I think it was the lotion or something, and the models they used almost insinuated that they were anti-black or anti-black skin color. And this ad, I think the ad was, it just comes with attention to detail. You have to be very sensitive about these things. The models, the tone, the language, the tone of the language. Yeah, it just further buttresses.
Excellent. So, I mean, there are a lot of trends, things that perhaps people never thought of in the last 10 years, but now they become so relevant, particularly because business success and performance is not really about profits anymore. People are thinking about the planet, they're thinking about ESG, they're thinking about people, employee well-being and engagement. So I'm going to ask Motola this question. Looking at how emotional intelligence has become, emotional intelligence was something that came over in 1995 or thereabouts. I think there was a book that was written I can't remember the author, but he brought that he had done with certain companies. So as far back as 1995, I think it only just built up in the 21st century when people realized, okay, people are not so engaged, something is not happening, what's it? And then someone brought up that research. So taking that into consideration and thinking, say, like 5 to 10 years from now, Motola, I'm asking you this, what future trends or development do you foresee regarding the role of emotional intelligence in business communication? What kind of practical steps or strategies would business communicators embark on to enhance their readiness for the trends that are going to come up when it comes to emotional intelligence?
That's definitely an interesting question. And in terms of future trends, I'll start with one that's already here and definitely is going to be so critical into the future, and that's artificial intelligence. For most of us who are business communicators, you'll find that a lot of the everyday communication skills and tasks, let me put it that way, will be or are already being handled by tech, whether it's your content development, whether it's your creative design, even strategy, actually. So there's going to be a lot of that happening. But one thing that I know will continue to be needed with business communicators who know how to manage internal and external stakeholders effectively. And, the best of the best are people who have really great emotional intelligence, who know how to manage stakeholders well. And in terms of practical steps, quite honestly, it's all about continuous upskilling. Building those needed skills and qualities. We've spoken about some of them here already, from active listening to negotiation, relationship management, leadership, even public speaking. Those are all things that will be critical. And it's all about upskilling. I recently took a course on neuro-linguistic programming, now, which is in the field of psychology. And the NLP approach is well recognized in business and with executive coaches, especially because it helps to build the skills. Now, someone will ask, Auntie, you are in communications, what's your own with psychology, But you see, those are things that are needed to help us in the skills that we need. And I really just want to recommend people on the call to look into this and look into other kind of trainings that will help make sure that we're ready, we're prepared, and we're continuously relevant, because that's going to be critical for the future. How relevant are you? now and going into the future. So it's all about upskilling, figuring out things that help you to be great in those spaces.
Excellent. So we have our first question I'm going to ask. Now, just throw it open to any of our panelists. So the question is, where does body language and self-mastery fit into how people manage themselves at work and in their career? Can you shed more light on these and how it impacts on ability to progress in your career or profession? So I'm going to throw it open to anyone of you to answer. It's a really good question, actually. Mr. Ozili, do you want to open the floor with an answer?
Okay, let me start. When you talk about body language, sometimes postures are not always with the body. It could be with your silence. It could be with what other people said about you and things like that. I think it's very, very important that to communicate with an audience, a familiar audience. There should be culture. That's what I'm talking about, culture, because there is not all the time that it has to be spoken. It's not all the time that it has to be designed in a particular way. Sometimes it may have to be the job of emotional intelligence might have been done in the design of the corporate culture of that particular environment. So you don't need to be told to do this because it's already part of the system. So body language in this case means that it's already in the system. You just follow the body language of the system, and then you do what it's required of you. So that's the little I can say about it. I'm sure my colleagues will have more to say.
Adibanke?
Yeah, I was going to say that as an immigrant, your body language and your ability to have a form of self-mastery is extremely important. A lot of people will call it code switching. So the way I'll talk to my Nigerian colleagues is different from the way I'll talk to my bosses or someone that is not, the same skin color that I am. I remember a conversation with a certain CEO, and it was after the interview process, and we're just talking, just having like a chit chat discussion, and I was like, oh, what language did you speak back in Nigeria? And I was a bit taken aback by that question because I mean, everybody knows that Nigeria is an English-speaking country, right? But apparently not a lot of people know. And so I had to do a bit of education, should I say, and I had to inform him that, Nigeria was actually colonized by an English-speaking country, and the same as Canada, And so, yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people in that position will probably not have reacted the way I did. But I think that sometimes you just have to understand that some people are just a bit ignorant, and they do need a lot of hand holding, and they do need a lot of education. So I say education and re-education, as opposed to probably just getting upset and flaring up. Body language is extremely important. The way you communicate, if you are communicating with you most have to have like a smile on your face, also have to have an enthusiastic disposition. But obviously, when you are dealing with a crisis situation, might be in terms of fire, there's almost like a body language that you have to have in that regard. And it's like, okay, if you are working in like a financial institution, for instance, and the company has lost a ton of money, almost like what happened in the should I call it Bitcoin space with a particular company, and I think the CEO at that time lost a lot of money. There is a certain body language you have to have. There are certain words that you have to have.
Yeah, I think yeah. Motala, would you like to add something?
Okay, can you hear me? Because people seem to be on the screen. Okay, so body language is so important, especially as we are going into a bigger and bigger global market space. different cultures, different beliefs, different opinions, different views. And you'll find that many times how you grew up, the things that you learned, the way that you react to things sometimes can be read in an entirely different way in another country or another culture. So it's really important to be careful about our body language in how we work as business communicators. If you're going into a new organization or you're going into a new country, it's important for us to understand what are the things that people are sensitive about in those cultures. For instance, I learned that there's actually a country, or I think it's, yes, that when you cross your legs, it's considered very disrespectful, when you're speaking to elders. If you watch, my daughter loves the South Korean movies. There's an interesting way in which they hold their cups when they have serving elders, and I find it really interesting. So those are things that if we say that we're business communicators, then we need to educate ourselves in those things when we move from culture to culture or from organization to organization. You won't get it right all the time, clearly, but at least let's do our due diligence so that we are not offensive unintentionally. So we're making sure that we're hitting the right notes.
Thank you. So what I hear from all of you is very clear. Emotional intelligence is really formation across cultural formation. So you have to have some kind of cultural awareness to be able to deal with different stakeholders. There's also the aspect of social formation, what to do and what not to do. And then there's obviously the part that comes with awareness, self-awareness of what is expected of you and what you're capable of doing in certain situations. Thank you for that. So we have another question here. And the question says, what can you do as an employee when HR and even the communications person in an organization are not emotionally intelligent? This is a tough one, but Mr. Odile, I'll give you this one because all these nuggets you've been dishing out, you'll be able to answer this question for people that, how do you emotionally intelligently tell somebody in HR that the person is not emotionally intelligent? I think that's what this question is asking.
First and foremost is that whoever asks that question must know all the principles of emotional intelligence, because I know that adaptability is a very, very critical aspect of every leader, every communicator, every HR person. You understand that if you're in HR and then you're only working for the rules of the company, then you are being described as a person, whoever asks this question, that the person is describing. But when you remember that an organization has its goal, the individuals within that organization have their own goals. So if they have their own goals, your job as a communicator, a manager, and the HR person is to ensure that whilst we are working towards achieving the organization goal, that the individual also achieves his or her own personal goals. What do I mean? If I have, let's assume that I'm working for a newspaper house and I have deadlines that I must meet by 6:30, and I have to leave probably Yanou to get to Surulere, in every day to come to work, and then at the end of the month I don't get my pay. How do I get to the place of work? How do I feed my family, and yet I come every day to meet these deadlines? So what the point is that my advice is that you write. If you have a graffiti street, you go there and write about the HR person, or you walk straight to the person and let the person know that, look, you are really not doing us what you are supposed to be doing for us. I'm quite sure that a lot of people, when you tell them the truth, it might hurt them the first 5 minutes, but when they go back and think deeply about it, it could change. So that's it. That's my reaction to it.
Thank you. Yeah. Is there any other one? Would you have something to impute, Blanca? you like to add something to what Ms. Odili has said? Is Banke there? I think you're frozen and muted.
I'm not. Oh, I said no.
There
I
you
think
are.
you answered it perfectly.
Okay, excellent.
I think you did.
I like the example that you've given, Mr. Odili, because you don't only highlight the need for us when it comes to emotional intelligence to say the right thing, but also saying it the right way. I think that's one thing we always miss. We could say the right thing, but the right way sometimes, it tends to be difficult. So we can model the right way and then say the right thing. So there's a second question here, and I'll direct that to you, Motola, because you had answered this. You have spoken about artificial intelligence, and the person says, with the onslaught of artificial intelligence and the implications for job losses, how can business communicators leverage emotional intelligence among other skills to protect their turfs on the one hand and do an even better job of what they do going forward?
I think it kind of fits from what I had mentioned earlier. So it's really about looking for those areas that it will be really difficult for artificial intelligence to take over and say, this areas I need to improve and elevate my skills in this space. And like I said, those areas include knowing how to make sure that you manage internal and external stakeholders. Because as much as tech and IT will come into the space, they are not going to go and have a conversation with government for you. They're not going to have a conversation with the community for you, and things like that. So, and those are areas where emotional intelligence is so critical. So it's about continuously upskilling in those spaces to make sure that you're constantly relevant. And just to speak to the other question that was raised earlier, I think something else, adding to what Odili had mentioned, is tolerance. The truth is, in organizations, there will be people who you will love, and there are people who you're not really excited about. So if your HR and communications people are unfortunately not very emotionally intelligent, or you feel that they are, it's a tough place to be. And I mean, first thing I will encourage is tolerance, because the truth is that you will always have colleagues that you're not very excited about. So please, let's be tolerant in our places of work, in managing others. And then also take up the place of leadership. You might not have the title, but you can take on the role. Leadership in the sense of make the decision to say, okay, I want to make a difference here. I want to improve things here. So how do I do that? If I don't have close relationships with these people, can I find someone who does and who can have the conversation with them? Are there ways in which interventions can take place that I can champion, in a wise way? So those are things that we can do to make sure the environment for employees are better improved.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So there's one last question which I will sort of throw open to anyone before I ask the last magic question, but this one has come from the audience. And it says, is there an implication of generational traits on emotional intelligence? Some say that the Gen Zs and millennials are, I wouldn't say the word rude, but more assertive in the corporate space. How should HR or the communications person respond to this?
Okay, I'll start. So I've worked in both HR and communications, and I know that this is real. Generations, because of the way that we're raised, sometimes have traits that are quite similar. So whether it's the Gen Zs or the baby boomers, all of those interesting names that we give different generations. You can sometimes just see a difference in traits in the way that people act, depending on their decades. Let me put it that way. And I think the first thing is being aware that this happens. Being aware of it means then you can approach it carefully. You don't think, oh, this person is just being outrageous. because you understand the context of how this person was either raised or where this person is coming from. It's not even just about the generation, it's even about cultures as well. You know, if you worked in a multicultural organization, or I mean, most of us have, you will find that there are people from particular cultures who are very outspoken. You know, they're out there, they're saying their mind. In fact, I remember there was one conversation happening in an organization that I was working at, and I was like, hey, and you know, the people from Northern America, especially the US, and then also Europe, they were just speaking about it, and I'm like, man, I can just imagine me having this conversation in Nigeria. They would just say, Motola, who sent you? You know, that kind of thing. And they were so bold and confident in things where we naturally would take a bit more care in how we speak about this thing. And even within Africa, it's the same thing. So generationally as well, same. So it's first being aware and recognizing that. And I mean, that's where we talk about diversity and inclusion, because there's so many different levels to us. And then when we're aware of that, it's also important to, of course, train properly. So people who are coming into the organization initially, many times have no clue, you know, how the world of work operates. So that's where the training comes in. We train, we guide, we mentor, so that they know how to operate in an organizational structure. But at the same time, we are careful not to break that sense of self, who they are, you know, because that's part of what makes them unique. So I would recommend those things in managing people of different generations, let me put it that way.
Fantastic. That's great. That's a great response. So someone else has asked another question, which obviously is somewhat related to what you responded to. The person says, in the developed world, there's a lot of focus on cultural training and intelligence. Yet in Nigeria, this is not actively being done in the workplace, despite the fact that we are a multicultural society with many different cultures, beliefs, and value systems. Do we think this is something that we should advocate for as communications professionals working in large organizations in particular? So I think it's a very important question, because there are a lot of people that are logged into this webinar from public sector, from different industries, who are different professionals. So I see people in audit, I see people in finance, and I see people in technical roles as well. So I think that multicultural system that we have, so society as well that we have, it's really important that that cultural training happens. So would you say it's something that we should advocate as communications professionals? And how do we go about it? I'll ask Mr. Odili, because I would like to hear what you have to say, being that you're basically working in a culturally heated space.
Okay, I think if we look at the emotional intelligent manager or communicator here, there are certain skills that let me just assume that that's the person who is going to solve all those problems, if I am clear. So I remember that I mentioned adaptability. Adaptability, he is the one to learn about the other people. He's the one to follow the movement. He's the one to follow the trends. He's the one to go with the generations, through upskilling, like Motola has said several times. And also, like Banke and Motola repeated several times about active listening. When you listen, if the emotionally intelligent manager is very, 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 very patient and listens very well, it's very likely, most likely, that the challenges like this will be handled fittingly. I think that if we follow the principles, self-awareness, being able to resolve conflicts, be adaptable, and always ready to listen and being empathic, honestly, you are going to solve the problems, no matter the generation, no matter the culture mix. It is all there for the emotional intelligent manager, HR, communicator to achieve? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So I like that I mean, I'm a person of acronyms. I love acronyms. And from everything that I've heard, I've deduced that there's a certain pause that one should acquire when it comes to exhibiting emotional intelligence. You have to learn to do things later. So not to be reactive, to pause and to see things from behind the scenes in that person's shoes. So there's a listening part of it. There's adaptability and awareness. There is the need for timing and tolerance, because obviously you're dealing with people of different cultural backgrounds and experience and emotional questions. There's a thing of having to empathize so that you're able to make that person feel included, heard, seen, understood, and then there's responsiveness. So not reaction, but responsiveness. So thank you so much for that, everyone. The last question, and I'll open it up to anyone to answer, is knowing that we've highlighted all the skills and qualities of the emotional intelligent manager or leader, would you say that emotional intelligence is innate or acquired? Is this something that one can train themselves to have? If it is acquired, I mean, what are the steps? I know that we've mentioned active listening and all of those things, but clearly there must be ways where people can actually build or improve on those skills underneath emotional intelligence. I mean, active listening is a skill that helps you to be more emotionally intelligent, but how does one train? How do you build that skill? Adaptability, how do you build that skill? How does one become resilient? So I would throw that open to anyone.
I think it's both really. I think it's both. It's a skill that we develop over time. Um, I remember even up till now, from our conversations with people in different spheres or in different sectors, we have been knowingly, subconsciously or unconsciously picking up some acceptable practices or some acceptable skills in relating with other people. So I think in that case, I can almost say there is an innate aspect of it, and there is also the learned aspect of it. And to build the skills, I think the best thing to do would be to probably attend workshops, to probably read books that talk about it, to probably discuss with your mentor how you can harness the skills that you have, and probably what's the word, harness those skills that you have and apply it to your conversations with your colleagues, with your internal stakeholders or your external stakeholders as well. But yeah, I think it is both in the aspect of it is innate and even by having a mentor, sometimes your mentor can, if you have probably if you had like a dispute in the office or a conversation with in the office, and then you go to your mentor, oh, I had this fallout with a colleague of mine, this is how I think I can handle it better. And then you seek advice from your mentor, and your mentor can tell you, oh, this is what to do, this is what not to do, this is how I would have addressed it, as opposed to how you addressed it. And also, about the Gen Z, I think the best thing to do is to avoid. I know that everyone has this popular belief that Gen Zs can be rude, but I think coming here and relating to people, you realize that this is how a lot of them talk, and they are encouraged to be assertive. They are encouraged to give their opinion. They are encouraged to, that's my 6-year-old niece. There are some things that she says, and I'm shocked to my bones, but they are encouraged to say those things because it builds self-confidence. It gives them, it helps to build their own person. And I think a lot of the culture in Nigeria, I think sometimes we try to, shut us up or try to tell us to be a bit more cautious with the way we speak. But I realized that being able to express yourself without, feeling that something negative, quote unquote, might happen to you, I think that it allows for a lot of self-expression, which almost drives into self-confidence at the end of the day.
Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap this up a bit, and I'll ask each panelist to give a one-line closing statement, one-sentence closing statement on how leaders can inspire and motivate employees during times of transformation. What would you, so for instance, if you were going to communicate to employees as a leader that the business was transforming to a digitally driven business, and there's some people who might be in the generation that doesn't understand what digital business is, how would you communicate that as a leader? Obviously, with your emotional intelligence, how would you communicate the fact that business is transforming to a digital business, making sure that employees across various generations don't feel like they're being abandoned or thrown away? So who wants to go first? Who wants to speak emotional intelligence language first?
I think I think I'm going to take a shot at it, just because in a previous place of employment, we had to move people from one software to the other. So we had to move them from like a desktop thingy to cloud. So we had to migrate them from desktop to cloud. And so I think constant communication is key, and understanding that in the organization we have different generations of people, and to these different generations of people, you have to have a strategy for each generation of people. I find that should I say, I don't want to say older generation or the boomers and upwards, they do prefer face communication when you have if you have an information to pass. And so sometimes I often prefer having like webinars, town halls, to facilitate or to communicate whatever it is I need to communicate. For instance, when we're moving to share, we also have a webinar, have a town hall meeting, send emails, have a training. So taking them along or carrying them along in change management, in the change management process is essential, so that they don't feel left out or so they don't feel sidelined. I think that's important as well. And also communicating to them that this process of change doesn't mean that they're going to lose their jobs, because I think that a lot of people fear change because they are unsure of the outcome. They are unsure of what that change process will mean for them and their present job. And I think communicating that this is not going to take away your job, this is just to ensure there is improved productivity. It will reduce the amount of time we use in dealing with a particular task. I think so. Constantly communicating them and reassuring them of the benefits of the new change or the new software or whatever helps to sort of allay the fears that we have.
Thank you. Marcela, you're next.
Okay, so I mean, this, like Banka mentioned, this is the space of change management or change communication, and it's really important to do things right. Otherwise, it can really go the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. So first, I would say it's important to be clear on the messaging. What are you trying to land? What is it that you want people to take away from the message that you're sharing with them? Because I've seen many people who go in to have a conversation, but they're not clear whatsoever what the outcome they want that conversation to be, whether it's an everyday meeting or a town hall or a presentation to the nation. You need to be really clear what the message is you're trying to land. I mean, Banker was saying something about assuring them that you might not lose your job. There are actually times that you're actually telling them you're going to lose your jobs, and in those situations, you just need to make sure that you have clarity on what the messaging is. Then prepare for it. Prepare and plan. How is it going to be said? And that's where the strategy comes in. What will be said? Who will say it? Because sometimes some people are better at landing messages than others. Who is the right person, the right spokesperson to have this conversation? That's where the preparation comes in. Next is in terms of media. what platform should we use to do this? Banker mentioned, having town halls or conversations like that. We have a plethora of platforms that you can use. Should this MD come and, sit with everyone? Should we do this digitally if it's a global organization? What media should we use? And it's also critical for it to be an ongoing process, because in fact, I read somewhere that it takes about 3 weeks for your message to actually sink in. I mean, that's in the advertising space, which Oteli can speak to. So it's an ongoing process, and you need to keep at it, have a long-term plan of communication. The other bit is engagement. It shouldn't be one-sided. It's important for people to also speak as well. Come back to you with what it is that they think they have what they've heard, because sometimes what you're saying and what people are hearing can be totally different, and you need to engage to be sure that people are actually hearing what you're trying to pass across. So engagement is critical. And I mean, ultimately rewarding good behavior, in quotes, is also important. So as you're moving towards something new, the people who imbibe the behaviors that you want, who are doing things right, rewarding them will be critical, so that others also take note and say, okay, this is where we're going, this is how we should be doing this, and more people get into it. Thank you.
So Lee, do you have anything to add? But you've stolen it all. You're muted.
I would say that this is where benefits marketing comes in. When you take your audience as a market and then explain to them clearly, these are the benefits that the individual is going to get as a result of this change. This is the benefit the organization and other stakeholders are going to get as a result of this. This is what we're going to save. Most people are very, very reasonable. When they see this, when they see benefits to themselves, benefits to the organization, time saved and everything, the tendency is to, let's try. That takes me to the next point I want to add, which is continuous learning. There was something we used to do then in the office, and that was continuous learning. Every week, somebody comes up, does a PowerPoint presentation on an area of a particular transition we're about to do, and the person makes the presentation, makes mistakes, is corrected, You learn as you're teaching. So they are slow learners. That helps them to learn faster. And then there's a third learning process, which a lot of people don't do, but we made it official, which is, if I don't know, you teach me. Everything I don't know and Banker knows, I'll go to Banker, she will teach me. What Banker does not know that I know, she will invite me, I'll come, I'll teach. So if you build a team that is cooperative and share knowledge, transition is really very easy. Thank you.
I like what you say about continuous learning, benefits marketing, and obviously long-term planning and engagement. You've all shown that emotional intelligence is something that's ongoing. Clearly, it's not something that is stagnant. It's contextual. It involves a lot of learning, sensitization, engagement. Thank you so much. So we're fast spent, 90 minutes, almost. And I'd like to invite everyone to put a big thank you in the chat box and appreciate our panelists. And I also like our panelists to smile so that we can take a nice picture. Yes, are we ready? And so there's going to be a poll that will go around to your emails. Please, 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 we'll really appreciate your feedback. And if there are particular topics that you like for us to address in our next webinar, please share. Once again, visit our website, www.iabc.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, IABC WAIG. We're also on Twitter, and we are open to more members. This is the best organization if you're a communications professional or if you're interested in communications. Thank you so much, Matola. Thank you, Mr. Odili. Thank you, Adebanke. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes. Yemi, Shola, and everyone else has been It's been a great 90 minutes. I've learned so much. I'm going to go and do much more. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are IABC, a global community of communication professionals practicing with integrity and passion. We're diverse. Diverse as the industries and disciplines we work in. With thousands of members on every continent, we're alive with knowledge and experience. We're the voice of communication practice. We use the power of communication to connect people to ideas, to job opportunities, and to other professionals. We spark conversations. We create connection. And we have fun. We're focused on insights and results. Sure, we like cool creative, but it has to stick in the hearts and minds of our audience and provide value to our organization. We're about global best practices that are current and relevant. We live by a code of ethics. We support a global certification program. And we recognize the best of the best around the world. So, what's in it for you? Well, start with our lively and varied networking events, our regional and international conferences, our certification programs, and our award shows. Whether you're an experienced communicator or new to the field, whether you work for a corporation, government, agency, or nonprofit, IABC fits your personality and your professional goals. IABC. We use communication to engage, influence, counsel, and execute. We connect communicators around the world. We are IABC.